and welcome everyone to another episode of the Weekly Coop. It's good to have our first guest of 2024, having someone that is going to kind of enlighten us about leadership and consciousness. So this member here, we met through a collective group a while ago, and it's a guy that I really looked up to in terms of his ethereal knowledge. As well as his business knowledge, being able to combine those two. I think it's very rare, very unique to do that perspectively. Um, but Kody, appreciate you being on. Maybe introduce yourself. What do you do? Who you are? And just a little background.
Yeah, absolutely. So, name's Kody Helm, obviously. You got that in there. And yeah, you and I met through a collective group together a few years ago and had some interactions in there. And so, since then, we've departed from that group. And I have pursued a career currently in the cyber tech industry or cybersecurity industry, I should say. Middle level management there now and striving to be a COO eventually either within this company or at a newer, smaller cybersecurity company later on. But what I've really worked to do is incorporate the things that I've learned from my spirituality practices into my day to day environment at a corporate America setting, right? And
Right.
so I've done a lot of that as I stand today. And along the way, I've identified areas where consciousness frankly needs to be improved in the corporate environment, and we can bring greater sensibility and clarity amongst C leaders in terms of their like self-awareness and ability to drive organizations, right? So that's kind of where I'm at now is working on building a business where I consult with C-level executives, entrepreneurs, and talk to them about their leadership styles, and then provide feedback and integrations of the spiritual side of things so that organizations can be led in a more conscious manner.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I fully agree. So I work in technology as well. That's my like regular 9 to 5 working job. I work remotely, but the headquarters is in. I'm from St. Louis, and we do a lot of resell for big tech companies. Cisco is probably the biggest client we work with, but we work with like Palo Alto Networks,
There you
Juniper
go.
Networks, Hewlett Packard, Apple, AWS, Microsoft, like all the big tech companies that you can think of, we resell them. Like we're huge. We're one of the top technology companies that you could actually find, which is very unique because we also do our own servicing from a consulting perspective, app development, strategic resourcing, anything you can think of. We actually provide that service, and it's very unique because I definitely have struggled through working in this industry and working in this company from a consciousness perspective, like working with or having conversations that are more conscious, aware
Yep.
situations. And I've ran a couple of coworkers though that are actually pretty aware, which is actually kind of, it makes it a lot easier, because going to like dinners and like having like big group get-togethers from my team, like once a year in the office is a lot better because now there's like more aware people, and it's usually kind of like people between the ages of like 23 and like 30 is kind of where I'm finding that sweet spot of like more aware individuals. I remember there's a guy I work with right now. He's on the same team as me. Like he talks about like fasting, like he'll fast for like, 2 or 3 days. And, I thought I was the only one that was crazy enough to do, stuff like that. But this guy, he's like, yeah, I do this like, once a month. And, I know all the kind of like spiritual benefits and like physical benefits of it. And it's nice to have them, from a conversation perspective. So
Absolutely.
from a leadership perspective, though, I definitely see some disconnect. And C-suite to me should be the conscious suite because you should have leaders that are conscious people because when you have conscious leaders, you have people that lead out of higher vibration, higher frequency. They lead out of
Yes,
love. They lead out of peace, content, bliss, courage, all those high level, vibrations, instead of, fear, shame,
of
guilt,
course.
anger, the lower vibrations. And, when you have lower vibration leadership, that's where the turnover comes into play. Because, when you think about working at a company, like, you have to think about the ROI perspective as well. And, maybe you could actually talk about that more on, how companies invest time and energy into employees because they want an ROI within a certain time frame. But like when someone leaves, in a very short period between, like, 3 and 6 months, you know, there's actually costs that get incurred from those departures that people that leadership doesn't really think about. Like, the
Yes.
top leaders do think about it, but like those middle managers and directors, I don't think about it, because if they did, they wouldn't lead the way they do.
Yeah.
And what's your perspective on that?
Completely agreed. So I think the first and most important thing of having conscious C level leadership is that it turns the focus outward, right? We see so
Mhm.
many C-level executives that have these like big equity packages, and their incentives are really they're self-incentivized, right? Their
Yeah.
goal is to maximize their own individual profit, sometimes at the expense of what is best for the organization as a whole, right? And so by having people at the top who are self-serving and not thinking about those below them and bringing cohesion and awareness to the teams that they are serving, essentially,
Mhm.
you have these greedy, high level people who end up sticking around to get their golden parachute until it's time for them to depart and move on to the next organization and do the same thing, right?
Mm.
And I think
Yeah.
the traits of an effective leader are to build up those below them and promote them to expand, promote them to learn, promote them to grow. And we see a massive gap in that in the C level with C level executives, partially because their incentives financially are so great, right? That the incentive for development of others comes secondary, if not like tertiary, to what their objective is. And so I understand that organizations are living beings, and they, at the end of the day, their goal is to maximize their profit, especially in a market economy, especially in a capitalist environment. And the C level's objective is to contribute to the maximization of profit, right? But I think you can do that more effectively if, to your point, you reduce attrition and have people around who actually desire to contribute to the health of the organization for the health of the organization and not for self serving needs, right? So there's two sides to this from my perception. You have the one side where, of course, people are subject to their human elements, their desire to serve selfishly. But as you raise consciousness in any environment, you increase the connectivity of all the beings in that environment, right? And the awareness of connectedness in that environment, perhaps more importantly. And so it's no secret that the things that get flown down in an organization start at the C-suite and they roll downward, right? It's trickle down economics. It's really hard to make bottom up change in an organization. It's a lot easier for top down change to occur when the leaders are driving those initiatives. And so it's my perspective that if leaders were to incorporate the same level of rigor behind driving connectedness and improving attrition in a more aware or conscious manner, the organization as a whole would benefit financially, which serves the human side of it, right? For
Mhm.
everyone involved. So I don't see these things as separate. I see them as connected and interconnected in a lot of ways, because it truly is a benefit to both the individuals in the organization and the organization as a whole when you incorporate consciousness and awareness into the organization, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I like to use sports as a comparative method, and you talk about the financial packages that, these C suite, executives get to have. And part of it is, if they get let go, they get financially compensated very, very well. And the reason why I use sports in this analogy is, when a head coach gets fired, you see a lot, or any coach that gets fired from a sports team, they get paid out millions of dollars, like when they get fired, because it's like negotiated in their contract and they like, have all these things. But like, I guess where it's a gap for me is when we get fired on our lower level jobs, like we get compensated maybe for the PTO that we don't like use that we have left, or we get some sort of maybe severance, uh, but you have to file for unemployment and like all these things because of the financial stress that gets put on you. But like these people at the top, if they get let go, they get seven figures coming in their way for not even working. And like that's the shit that like kind of gets me sometimes. And I guess, my next question for you is do you think the monetary aspect does matter for, people that work in not even just like, associate jobs or entry level jobs, but even like, middle management, maybe some directors as well. Do you think the monetary aspect, if it was better, there would, I guess, just be a happier, culture right now in the corporate world? Because I just don't think the corporate world is happy right now, to be honest with you, as a collective group.
I completely agree. So the first thing that I would say there is that I think that a fundamental part of a human being's drive for success within an organization should be tied to the company performance. And what I mean by that is more companies should offer equity to their employees because then you have
Mm,
incentive. So we're looking at this from the monetary lens, right? Then you have incentive at the lower levels for higher performance, if you will, right? And if we're looking at this from like the manager, director, and VP lens, I mean, if you're in an organization where there's no equity package, where your performance doesn't have a direct correlation to the performance of the company and therefore the uh, growth of your, let's say, ownership in the company, then you're going to have that dissatisfaction at a higher level, I believe. So what I mean by that is when you're just given a salary and you know the only way to increase your financial position is to just clamor through people and climb the ranks of leadership to get a higher salary, right? Then you fundamentally break down any concern for others along the way and you just have a bunch of people who are striving to just battering ram through the organization to get to that higher salary level, right? When you introduce equity incentives, uh, you change or shift that behavior because everyone's performance at that point becomes a contribution to the organization. And the better the organization does, the more the employees benefit directly, right? When there's an increase in stock price, if you hold equity within that company, then you're going to directly benefit from the increase in performance of the company. So, yeah, I think that at the management, director, and VP level, the monetary aspect is huge. And really, at every level, the monetary aspect is huge. But we know from studies that human beings aren't measurably happier after a $75,000 a year salary, right? So you don't, for every level that you climb after $75,000 a year in salary, you're sacrificing a lot more in time and sweat equity, and your happiness levels don't increase in correlation with a salary increase. And so I think it comes down to the individual at that point where it's what is incentivizing me, what is driving me to move forward at this company, what's keeping me motivated, what's keeping me going, And if it is the financial aspect of things, then truly asking yourself, like, is my performance tied to this organization in any way? Am I going to spend my entire life clamoring for that C-level title only to get to the end of my life and have achieved that potentially and achieve my golden parachute and walk away with loads of money, but have wasted my entire life doing so? So yeah, I think that the latter of those things leads to severe unhappiness among an employee or the employee group, and the former of those things, consequently, like if you're given equity along the way, you can leave with a similar packet, not the same value, but a similar like investment in the company, right, based on your performance. And I really think a lot of dissatisfaction comes from when an employee's performance is not directly tied to the benefit of company performance, right? Where like you're putting
Mm.
in the work and you're putting in the hours, but you're not directly receiving any incentive outside of that. So if I had any advice to organizations today in this day and age, it would be offer people equity, offer people incentives. And I think the world is trending in that direction. I think things are changing in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, publicly traded companies offering stock, I think, is a good idea. I know people that work for publicly traded companies, they get the stock options, and that is pretty attractive. And if there's companies that get acquired or getting let go, the option to sell shares, and collect the profit off of that, and or keep those options and try to exercise them in a way where it's beneficial for you, I think is
Sure.
good. I guess like my only question for what you just described, which I think is a great point. I really do think equity is the important part to a company. I didn't realize that stat about 75K, like you're not much happier after that incremental increase. That's a good point. So, for private companies, not
Yeah.
publicly traded companies, how would you be able to offer equity? Like if you have, thousands and thousands of employees, like, do you have a solution for that?
Uh, yeah. So that, well, if the company intends to go public, I'll move forward with like if the intent is for the company to eventually go public, at that point you issue pre-IPO shares to employees is what I would say, as
Mm,
opposed to like a dollar value to them, right? So if you start with a company that's already public, they're going to issue you equity in the company at a dollar value threshold. They're going to say, hey, you get $100,000 worth of equity for joining with us. If you're
yeah.
with a private company and your intent is to go public, then you give people pre IPO shares where you say, hey, we'll give you 100 shares pre IPO for you joining us. Then if the company goes public, that person holds whatever the post IPO prices times the number of shares they were granted, right?
Right.
And this is where so this is where a lot of here's my so let's take it back to if you're at a private organization, right, and your goal is to, let's say, maximize your profits, maximize your potential in the near or long term, my advice would be to climb within that company as much as you can and take the skills you've learned from that company to go to a smaller company that intends to go IPO at a higher level,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
then if you're let's say you get to the director level at the company you're at now and it's a private company, right? You can take that same skill set to a smaller company and get in at the VP or even at a C level and get
Mm,
issued pre-IPO shares at that level and help take the company public, and that's a massive benefit to your financial gain, obviously, right? So if you're with a private company that doesn't intend to go public, climb the ranks of that company and use that skill set to get to a company that does intend to go public and help them
yeah.
go public. And then you receive your financial reward and financial benefit, right?
Ooh.
For doing so.
Okay. I
Yeah.
like that. I work at a private company. It's probably never going to go public, which is crazy because the revenue is, I think, 14 billion. Um,
Wow.
like, yeah, like we make
That's
a lot of
insane.
money every
Yeah.
year. Like, it's pretty
Right.
insane. And they do profit sharing, but it's a very small percentage. Benefits, health benefits are great, and we'll get into that probably shortly too. But Y- That's a good point. So like I'm actually taking this as feedback from you right now. Making content, but also taking this as a mental note because I've been in the corporate world for 5 years. Yeah, about 5 years. Been at the same company right now for about 4 years, and it makes me think because like I'm kind of associate level right now, like not managerial yet, but like kind of teetering on like customer success, like associate. So, I like where your head is at because I do think, yeah, working for like a big corporation for, quite a few years, like kind of grinding it out, seeing where you land, especially, and I think the banking industry or the finance industry is really good at this. Like you can go to a JP Morgan and like, it's not going to be great. Like it's going to be a lot of hours, like 60-hour work weeks for, like 3 4 years. But then I see a lot of those guys when they get out of those big companies, they got very big roles like right away at like smaller financial firms or like smaller banking organizations, fintech or whatever. Like they're getting put into like managerial or like director roles, you know,
Yep.
and only
Yep.
being in the industry. But it's like that. It's like that badge of honor or like that badge of respect because you work for a big company like that. So,
Yeah.
um, and I think technology is no different either because like if you work for Apple or Google, Microsoft or whatever,
Absolutely.
getting into a smaller company. Like if you work, at a bigger company for I think 4 or 5 years,
Yes.
you could get in a smaller company and get to
Yes.
a better position.
Yes. And that right there, what you just spoke on, uh, if you're an employee, that's an important distinction. Whatever industry you're in, seek to get with the biggest organization in that industry, right?
Hmm.
Climb the way up the ranks at that so a notable organization, climb the way up the ranks at that bigger organization, and you get plucked by smaller organizations at a higher level. Right now, the pay increase might not be significant, but if you can get pre IPO shares or equity in a smaller company that's growing, that will change the course of your life forever. That will change the trajectory of your life forever. That's one way to get ahead, quote unquote, get ahead as an employer, break free from the matrix as an employee, right? There's this connotation in the spiritual community that you have to be a business owner in order to break free from the matrix. And that's not entirely true these days, especially with remote work now, right?
Yeah.
If you can work from home, that's already location freedom. That's one aspect of freedom, right? The next thing is financial freedom. Well, how do you get financial freedom as an employee? You're bringing in post tax money. It's a really challenging thing to do unless you're really intelligent at investing and know where and how to allocate funds, right? And it should be noted that money flows to those who know how to allocate it best. I
Yeah.
want to make that clear. If you're an employee and and you're good at allocating your funds to strategic investments, even if it's post-tax, you can break free from having a 9 to 5 job. Make no mistake about it. You don't necessarily have to start a business to do so. Also, the trap that you fall into with starting a business, I've seen this time and time again, is that a lot of people just end up being self-employed. They just create a job for themselves. So you're still working in a rat race, but you've still got to show up for your job, right? You still have to
Mm.
be there to make money. You're still trading your time for money. That's not a business owner. At that point, you're self employed, which is just a job for yourself, right? You still have to trade your time for that money. You still have to show up for clients. You still have to be there physically. A business owner is someone who implements systems, tools, processes, and people to make it so that they don't have to trade their time for that money. The organization runs
Mm.
independently of their time, right? So I want to make that distinction for people because there's this pervasive mindset, especially among the spiritual community, that you have to break out of a 9 to 5 in order to become free, but you can leverage your 9 to 5 to become free if you apply certain tools and skill sets and you're good with the allocation of resources, right? If you want to be a success at all in life, you have to understand the allocation of resources, right? That's just base level knowledge. Time is a resource. How do you allocate your time? Money is a resource. How do you allocate your money? Your energy is a resource. How do you allocate your energy? Right? Those things are crucial to becoming a success. And if you mismanage those things, well, it becomes apparent in your everyday life that manifests itself as a lack of success, right?
Right.
So you might be
Okay.
saying, now, I'm talking a lot about money and getting ahead and the human side of things, right? Which is like the very three-dimensional world. So where
Yeah.
does spirituality incorporate itself in all this? Where does
Right.
consciousness incorporate itself in all of this? And that's something that I really wanted to get to with you today, man. So
Yeah.
one of the things that is so important that I see people failing at time and time again, and this I'll touch on why this is important to me in a moment, but people sacrifice their personal integrity for personal gain. I'll say that again.
Mm.
People sacrifice their personal integrity for personal gain. And
Shoo.
what do I mean by that, right? So people that are working a 9 to 5 job, they are willing to people please, they're willing to schmooze, they're willing to violate their own personal constitutions at work with the people around them in order to get ahead financially, which is out of alignment with an individual constitution, right? And people are
Yes.
more willing to do this at a job than anywhere else in their lives. They'll put boundaries in place with their kids, with their wives, with their family, but not with their boss, right? Because their boss has that carrot. They're dangling that carrot of success over your head. So the advice that I would give if you want to incorporate consciousness into your 9 to 5 life, and this will actually, believe it or not, help you get ahead in an organization. Never sacrifice your personal integrity for personal gain. Do not, if there needs to be a no in the room, if somebody needs to know that their feedback or their thought process is not the way to go about doing things, you need to be the person to speak up. You should not
Mm.
people please and schmooze just to attempt to get to the next level. I constantly tell people no at my organization. I constantly put boundaries in place at my organization. I constantly prioritize tasks in a way that's beneficial for my time and my
Right.
life and not what my manager or my manager's manager wants me to do. And I communicate that with them in a way that's not disrespectful, right? It's like, you've given me all
Mm.
these tasks, you've given me all these things to do. Here's what I can commit to over the near term, and here's the priority that I will address these things in. Here's what I will not commit to in the near term.
Yeah.
And here's what I can commit to over the long term, right? So understanding that if you're not willing to violate your personal integrity and you're willing to put boundaries in place in your personal life, you need to do the same thing in your professional life. And look at all the C-level leadership that you engage with on a daily basis. Do any of those people cater to or people please the people around them? No. They say no to everything. They put directives in place. They define strategies. And you can do the same thing at your level, no matter what level you're at. And I guarantee you, your managers, the people that you report to, will respect you more if you do those things.
Mm. Wow. I'm blown away. Like this is this is such an amazing conversation because you know, I was in that trap where I was like I have to start a business. I have to like quit my job. Like I have to get to like this certain point, and whatnot. But the thing is, I don't know if that's completely necessary. If you're in a good industry or you're in a good company or you're with good people, if you do work remote, like you can be wherever you want, and you can have opportunities to grow a lot quicker. And the thing is, you don't have to worry about. I know we are talking 5D, so I guess like just to go back to the 3D for a second, like you don't have to think about like taking out big loans, or you don't have to think about the financial implications of starting a business versus like if you work for a company and they give you great benefits, great pay, remote. Like if you have everything in front of you that's great, then shut the fuck up about, your
Ah,
situation.
my
So,
God.
yeah.
Yes.
So,
Look,
and honestly, it's interesting cuz like yeah, it's those spiritual wealth gurus that want you to like It's because they want you to be desperate to like find a way out, and they don't go within themselves to find their way out. They have to use like a mentor or coach. And I'm not saying like all collective groups are bad or all spiritual wealth gurus are bad. There are good people. There are. But
For
like the
sure.
thing is, some of them use this fear tactic to
Yeah,
put you in a state of, oh, I desperately need this person to actually enhance my life. When in reality, you can do it yourself. And that's what you were talking about in this 5D perspective that you threw on us in a beautiful manner. So I agree. I think people don't set boundaries for themselves because they're so desperate to chase money. I think that is just the initial problem, like very watered down
yeah,
response. But like, I think people are just so desperate for money, fiat chasing, that they don't look within themselves and actually know what they want to do. So, like, they
right.
take jobs that they don't love. Like, that's the thing. Like, I think there's a job out there for everyone, and it's not a bad thing. I
Yeah,
like, if you love marketing and you work for a marketing agency and you can work remote, have good benefits, good pay, and it aligns with you, like the leadership aligns with you and the company, aligns with you, and there are companies still with good values too. That's one thing that I've had to change my mindset on too, is not all corporations are bad. Like, not all corporations are immoral. There are good corporations that act in good faith, that act in goodwill. There are. And when you find a spot like that, you're going to be so happy. You're going to put out your best work, because when your vibration is higher, your productivity is higher, and you just put out better energy. And so when you put out better energy into your work, like, you're putting out a better product, better service, the customer is going to be happier, you're going to be happier, and it's a beautiful exchange. And that's the
yeah,
thing about like the spirituality perspective that you touched on, like setting boundaries and having high standards for yourself. So like, when you go into interviews for like that new job at that new company, you are interviewing them as much as they interview you. That's what people don't understand, is like, when you go into interviews, be confident. I remember I got rejected when I first got out of college. It was hard for me to find a job, which was crazy. It was 2019. The economy was pretty good, and I couldn't find a job. And I remember I was like interviewing at this company. I think it was like a staffing company, and I'm glad it didn't work out. God's plan. But the person, the feedback I got from the person was saying that I was too confident. And I'm like, I'm glad you cut me from like the interview list, because if you don't want someone that's confident, then you don't want a real like person that wants to like actually work. Like, you just want like a slave. Like, you want someone that's just going to be a yes person, that's going to compromise their morals, their integrity, their authenticity. You just want a brown noser, a kiss ass. Like, you don't want someone that's actually going to be a good fit. You just want someone that just wants to stroke your ego. And like, I'll never forget that answer, or like that reasoning why I got cut from a job, application. So I think, what I'm trying to get at it is, have people that respect you. And there are people that will respect you, and they want you to be confident. They want you to express yourself fully. We just, you have to really go within yourself and think, what do I want to do and who do I want to be? And like,
yeah,
I think what's beautiful is my brother is a great example. And I'm not trying to call him out or anything, but I know he's listening. Probably he's going to be listening to this. But he's an accountant. He works at a big accountant firm, and he wants to stretch, into working, with taxes, and like helping people with taxes, and like helping people um, find ways to stretch their money even further, and those sorts of things. And I think that's beautiful. And he wants to now stretch into accounting, like for either like a tennis brand or like a cannabis brand, and like, because he's now thinking, oh, I want to be in an industry that like I fully enjoy. And he loves tennis, he
yeah,
loves cannabis, like he loves bio companies too. But he's finding himself. And I think
Yeah.
that is such a beautiful journey because, like, me, I think my journey is the entrepreneurial route, being a leader and being a voice and being a speaker. That's just where I thrive the most. But seeing my brother in his journey in like trying to find himself in the corporate world space, but like truly be happy in the corporate space, I think that's such a beautiful perspective that I didn't really think about for the past couple of years. But now that I'm seeing him do it, I'm like, this is cool. Like, and
Yeah.
and I think he just has higher standards for himself now, and he doesn't want to overwork himself like with tax seasons and stuff. So I got
I
a lot of
respect
love
it.
for you, bro. Thanks, Connor, for being a good example.
That's fantastic, man. It's nice to have people in your life that set the example for you like that. And one thing I'll say about something that you touched on is at the end of the day, when people are clamoring for, let's say, greater income, more money, all you're really striving for is the feeling those things are going to give you. And what people forget is that those feelings associated with those things are readily available to you at any time, at any point in time, right? The difference is that when you get that windfall of money, let's say, that's a short-lived feeling. That feeling is like, oh, I've got all this money, and then it dissipates. It's like buying a new car, right? I bought a Tesla last year, and for the first month I was like, I absolutely love this car. And now there's only things that I can find that are wrong with it, right? So it's like that feeling is short-lived when it's a material thing that you're after. If you go from object referral, which is the outside world, right? Everything that you have materially brings you the feelings you're looking for, to personal referral, internal referral, meaning you know that you can generate the same feelings on your own through meditative practices, through Wim Hof breathing, whatever modality you choose, the feelings that you're looking for are already available within you. They already exist, right? And so, and the difference is that those things are permanent. When you refer to yourself, self referral, those feelings are permanent. They don't go anywhere. When you generate positive emotions about yourself and your self worth, and when you feel those things inside of you, it's not fleeting. You can go back to them anytime you want and regenerate those feelings, regenerate those emotions, right? You can't do that with the outside world because you'd have to constantly acquire more stuff, right? And what is the meaning of the word stuff? Think about it in the context if you're a hunter, right? When you stuff something and you're a hunter, you are filling an empty carcass to preserve the image of life. So when you buy stuff, what are you doing? You're filling your empty soul to preserve the image of life for others, right? So if you're clamoring for money so that you can feel a certain way because money makes you feel happy, well, you're just stuffing the empty holes of you with an external object to bring yourself an elevated emotion. And that doesn't work because you're just preserving the image of life as opposed to actually having life and actually being life. And you can make yourself life by generating those feelings within you. You can give yourself life. You can revitalize yourself by doing it on your own. And then it doesn't matter if you have a 9 to 5 job. It doesn't matter if you live in a clay fucking hut. It doesn't matter if you're sleeping on the sidewalk in a cardboard box. If you can feel internally happy, which is what everyone's going for, they just want that feeling that money gives you, that material objects give you, you've got it. And there's nothing you need to do more, right?
Oh man, yeah, yeah. So, do you know who Dan Bilzerian is?
I do know who Dan Bilzerian is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so for the perspective that I'm about to go into, Dan Bilzerian is a guy. For those of you that are listening and don't know who he is, he's a social media kind of influencer type guy. He got rich off of poker. Some say dad's money from like a trust and stuff, but that's not the important information. What the information that's important is, this guy literally had everything. Like he had like his own cannabis brand.
back.
All right, there we go. Yeah. Always happens. Got to cut that out too. That's okay. So I'll just start from the beginning. So Dan Bilzerian is a social media influencer that has a lot of money, cars, goes on, a lot of trips and has like 20 to 30 women at his disposal.
Yep.
And it's funny because like he lives this lavish lifestyle, quote unquote, that like people chase on a fucking daily basis, especially men, which I think is like super toxic. And it's funny though because like he went on podcasts and he started talking about how like empty his life was, no matter the trips, no matter how many girls like he hooked up with, like no matter how much money he had, no matter like if he was going to, you know, Thailand or kickboxing in Costa Rica, like he was doing like he had a jet, everything. And he was
Yep.
like, you get to a certain point where you're just like, whatever. Like the more money you have, like you can buy shit, but like the thing is, you're still like empty. He's like, I was empty. Like I was still empty. And like it's not a like sustainable lifestyle for a lot of people because like you're just chasing the next thing. Like if you can buy, yeah, you can buy the Tesla and then like, all right, I got the Tesla. Now it's like, oh, let me get the Maserati. I got the Maserati. Let me get the Ferrari. All right, let me get the Lambo. Let me get the Bugatti. Like, and then you get there and you're just like, well, shit.
Yep.
I mean, what's after that? Like,
Yep.
do I got to customize a car to make it, 2 mil. Like, I got to buy a house that's like, twice the amount of my house now. Um,
Yeah.
and, I got to travel to like every single continent in the world. Like, okay, so do I go to Antarctica now? Like, it's just, it's crazy because people put so much emphasis on their their material things. And like you're right, it's like just trying to fill an empty soul. But like when you're actually doing what you love every single day, it doesn't feel like work. And I'm not a materialistic guy, so like I'm cool with just having one car. Like I'm cool with one house, as long as it's like self-sustainable at some point in time. If I can grow my own food source and shit like that, that's a
Yeah.
win for me. um the ability to travel around the world it would be a nice thing too.
Yeah.
So I mean really, yeah, it's just, and I can be happy with one woman in my life. Like I know
Yeah.
like I can be
Yes.
happy with one partner. I don't need
Yes.
20 to 30 girls. Like that sounds like an
Yes.
overwhelming experience. So you're right, people are just they're so obsessed with material things and the almighty dollar and all that. And I think once I did psychedelics, I kind of grew out of that. Like I started to realize I don't really care what my car looks like. I enjoy my car. It's a Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk. It's like a Stingray
Say
gray,
no.
so it kind of looks like a Batmobile. Like it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
um, I'm not attached to that. I don't make that my
Good.
personality.
That's
I
the
don't
key.
buy expensive clothes. So what like how I guess like with people that are so attached to like material things, like were you ever attached to material things at one point in life? And if you were, like how did you get out of that phase?
Yeah, I have a good response to that. I love material things.
Hmm.
I still love material things, right? Uh, the difference is that I'm not attached to any of them. I love
Mm,
nice things because I'm aware that abundance is my natural state. And I've
hmm.
only learned lack through society. I've only learned scarcity through society. I've only been
Yeah.
programmed to believe those things. And so I like material things because to me, those are a manifestation of my belief in abundance.
Mm.
Can I live without material things? Absolutely. Have I lived without material things the majority of my life? Absolutely. But I feel that part of my existence here on this earth is to experience an abundance of material luxuries to show as a form of showing that I'm in connection with my abundance, right? Again, there's no attachment to that at all. I could lose my Tesla tomorrow, and it wouldn't be a big deal for me. I've come to that place before where I was in a previous relationship, and I had my daughter with this other woman, and we lived a pretty comfortable life. I was making a great salary. We had a nice place to live. We had two really nice cars. By all stretch of the imagination, people in society would look at me and say that guy's successful, right? But I was deeply unhappy. I was deeply unfulfilled in my life, and I left all of that behind. I sold both the cars and bought a $5,000 beater Jetta that had bubbles on the window tint, and I called it Bubbles because of that, right? I left everything. I lost all of my money in the process. I went $50,000 into credit card debt to pay for attorneys, and I'm still in some ways, well, I recently have gotten out of that and am experiencing abundance in my life now as a result of years of internal alignment and years of inner work and reparenting myself, reprogramming my unconscious mind. And I now realize that that experience made I used to be attached to material things. I thought the image of those things is what gave me worth, right? I liked pulling up to my daughter's jujitsu practice and people were like, "Oh, this guy's got money and he's well off." I enjoyed that. But through losing all of that and then getting it all back now and then some, I have a renewed sense of appreciation for those things because they aren't coming from my desire for external acknowledgement, for external for people to see that like externally I'm worthy. They're rather now a manifestation of me discovering my own worthiness and me discovering my own abundance and my own inner peace and my own inner happiness, right? And that's a fundamental difference in approach there. And now, consequently, I have zero attachment to all of it. It doesn't mean anything to me except for the fact that it's a manifestation of my own inner alignment. But just if I were to lose those things, again, it wouldn't mean that I'm misaligned, right? It doesn't
Right.
matter to me at all anymore. And I approach it more from the lens now of like, I like material things because they represent to me at this stage of my life that I have experienced and am in alignment with my inherent natural abundance, right? I've unlearned
Mm.
my lack and scarcity mindset over time.
That's yeah, that no, that's awesome. I like things, I guess material things, but I'm not attached to them. I like that
That's the
perspective
key.
because
That's the key.
because
Yeah.
you definitely don't want to you don't want to hate money or like say money is the root of evil because I don't think that's true. Money just brings out the true side of you. That's just my perspective on it, and I think demonizing wealth and abundance is just that's a lack and that's an insecurity that people just have to go through. Yeah, I feel like at some point, I guess unless you're like a trust fund baby, you know, I mean, I drove a beat up minivan like in high school and didn't have a car in college, so like I lived a life where it wasn't super glamorous, but now it's kind of like getting to that point where I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool. It's pretty abundant. I have less stress, so that is nice. You talked about the struggles of debt and those sorts of things, and I think if you put yourself in debt, what is the debt for? Like that's just my always question for people that get put into mass amounts of debt. Like, if because Robert Kiyosaki talks about like his debt level, but like his debt level is different because he's got a bunch of assets and like he's generating like cash flow. Like it's different than someone that's like buying Louis Vuitton and like getting into thousands and thousands of dollars of credit card debt. That's reckless and irresponsible. So I guess unless you're reselling that stuff, which I don't think you are, but I guess yeah, yeah, I love that point. So are you married now?
Yes. Yeah. So my current wife and I recently got married and we have a blended family. She has two kids from a prior relationship. I have one child from my prior relationship.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we had a son together recently. So we've got three daughters and one son. Big family.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing.
And so you, to your point earlier, where you mentioned like the Dan Bilzerian thing, right? Being with all these women, and I I have never been as happy as I am today through committing to one person, one woman. And I've
Yeah.
never seen the success that I've seen in my life until I made that decision. Like it changed my life in every measurable way possible. And I know a lot of guys out there who are married and unhappy because they see on Instagram that all these guys are with all these other women. And I run myself through a test, right? Like if you ever start to get those feelings and you're a guy out there experiencing that, run yourself through a test, okay? Are you in better shape than you've been in since you've been with your wife? Are you in better shape? Do you have more money? Are you more successful? Do you feel happy? Right? Run yourself through these check boxes, and if all those things are no's, then maybe you're in the wrong relationship. Maybe you need to venture out and find someone who is better for you and wants you to be a better, higher version of yourself. For me, every single one of those boxes is checked. I'm in the best shape of my life I've ever been in. I'm the happiest I've ever been. I'm the most successful, both spiritually and financially, I've ever been in my life. Every single measure of my life has improved since I've committed myself to one woman and have gotten married. I've never felt so fulfilled. I've never felt so happy. I've never had so much joy in my life on a day to day basis. Does it bring a lot of stressors? Absolutely. But what is life without that, right? I just see all those things as ways to learn and cultivate a best version of me possible, right?
Mm,
And being in a relationship and having kids is a constant it's a constant self reflection of self improvement. How much have you improved yourself day over day? And that's mirrored in your environment. It's mirrored in the quality of your relationship. It's mirrored in the quality of your relationship with your kids. All those things are mirrored back to you on a daily basis. And when you see those things improve, you know that you're doing things the right way, you know? And I think that so much of unhappiness in relationships, sorry, not to like tangent here, but I love this topic. So much unhappiness in relationships comes from not your partner, but yourself. Like
mm,
you, in some fundamental way, have become complacent or changed or stopped trying. You in some way have changed who you were to now where you're unhappy or unsatisfied. It's not usually your partner's fault. And I would challenge all the men out there that are unhappy in their relationships to think back on how did you behave when you were dating your wife? In what ways did you show up when you were trying to get her to be with you, to sleep with you? You were doing everything. You were pulling all the stops. You had the dates, the roses. You had everything that you wanted until you got what you wanted. And then you
yeah.
got what you wanted and you stopped trying. And now that's why you're unhappy. You need to keep that same fucking energy years into the relationship. I on my Instagram recently, I posted me and my wife went out to like a really nice dinner together. Like we do those things. I date my wife constantly because that keeps the spark alive. I show her that she's special. I prove myself and my value, my worth as a man by taking her out, doting on her, treating her right. And that right there that's what a woman wants. And so I would argue that most people are unhappy in their relationships because the man's not showing up as the same person as he was in the beginning of the relationship. Right. And it's like you've got to keep those things going to keep the spark alive. And if you fell in love with this person in the beginning, there were traits about them that you liked, those things haven't gone anywhere. You just have to uncover them through years of shit that you've poured onto this relationship. You've got to excavate that and go back and find those pieces of your significant other that you love and respect and that you fell in love with in the first place. Right.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And as a single male that's 27 right now, trying to find himself in I guess the dating world, take I definitely take for granted like some like just like aspects of like that one person that can really just bring you that peace and joy. I think that's what I value the most, and I guess that's where just like misalignment comes with my relationships personally, which is partially my fault because I don't find peace in myself. I still think 100%. So I'm not gonna find peace in someone else if I can't find it within myself. And I have peace for sure in myself more than I ever have in my life, but it's still like not 100% there. And it's really just hoping that you know having someone in my life that can balance me out in that regard, and bring me that peace. And when things do get chaotic, just to have that patience with me, because I know that life isn't perfect. And I think people try to portray life in the perfect manner. But like one thing I also want to add is when you look at a boss or a C-suite leader or a founder, business owner, I think their relationship with their significant other is very important. And I say that because, I mean, think about this. You have a founder, you have a C suite leader, he cheats on his wife. He's not good to his wife. He's not loyal. Maybe he's like not, he doesn't say very kind things to her. This is the person that he's like either he or she is married to, or is with an intimate level, like an intimate level. This When you have intimacy involved, that's different, because that is the most organic and raw connection you can make. If that person's not being good to their partner who gives them all those things, what makes you think that person is going to treat you any better? Because you make them
Yep.
money? Like
Yep.
that's the thing. Like if I have a, like, let's just say I have a guy, C-suite level, leader. It's like my leader, and he like cheats on his wife, isn't good to his wife. What makes you think he's going to be a good leader to me? Like, what makes he doesn't give a shit about his wife that like does so much for him, maybe, but like
Yeah.
I mean, what he's not going to care about me at all. So like, why would you want to work for that person? I guess is what I'm saying. Why would you want to do business with that person? That's one thing that I try not to align myself with from a business perspective, is people that mistreat their partners. And that's the sort of thing of like it's just it's something that I look at from a personality perspective. If that person is going to cheat on their significant other or doesn't value their significant other, they're not going to value me. So like it's something that I don't want to get myself involved with. So I do think relationships are important in terms of
Absolutely.
looking at it as an example of conscious leadership, because you have to lead in a relationship as well.
Of
So
course.
that's I think that's a good thought that you have. And honestly, like when you talk about that happiness and those sorts of things, that's what relationships are made to do. And when you have that alignment, your abundance is going to increase tenfold, because when you have someone like boosting you up, giving you that platform, like you're even closer to the 5D, because you have someone
Yeah.
like pushing you up by your feet in a
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
it's good to have a partner like that. But yeah, I also leaders, like I look at leaders on if I can, how they treat their significant other.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, here's one thing that I'll toil with a little bit. Think about the word that we call those people in corporate organizations. We call them leaders, right? How do we know that? How do we know these people are leaders? Do they act like leaders? Do they look like leaders? Do they talk like leaders? Do they behave like leaders? Like, what does leader mean? That's such a powerful term, right? Like people called Hitler a leader, right? It's like you got to think about this at a etymology level. Like, what does the
Mm,
term leader mean? What what are we saying that they're leading? Are they leading the organization? Are they leading the people in the organization? Are they leading themselves? What are the things that this person is leading, and why have we designated them as a leader? Why are they worthy of being followed? Right?
mm,
And I find that so many times I in fact, I can say this pretty unequivocally. I have never worked for one person I've worked for in an organization that I would be deemed worthy of calling a leader, right?
mm,
And this person manifested both organizational alignment as well as personal alignment, where
Mm,
they had their personal integrity in alignment with the organization's objectives, and they led the people in the organization just as well as they led the organization itself, right?
mhm,
That to me is a leader. And what's so funny is I see a lot of people uh, or I'll relate this to myself. A lot of people in organizations where there was a while where people were telling me that I wasn't ready for leadership, and I had to sit with that a lot because like, what are the things that make me not ready for leadership at a corporate organization? But I lead my family every day. I have 4 kids and a wife, and they trust in me unequivocally to make the right decisions. They trust in me unequivocally for their future to guide
mm,
them, right? So if I'm leading in my everyday life here at my house, how is it that I'm ill equipped to be a leader within an organization?
right.
How are those traits really any different from each other, right?
Yeah.
And I fail to see the gap there. Where I think that if you're entrusted as a leader in your household and you're doing a successful job, you can carry that same leadership skills over to an organization and you can lead people successfully. So that's something that I've toiled with myself and had to manage around in my day to day life. But yeah, coming back to my original point is I'm cautious to use the word leader with people in an organization because so many of these people, the majority of them, do not display the fundamental characteristics of leadership. Most of them are followers and they're engaged in followership, wherein they're just following the
Mm,
direction of the person ahead of them. They're following the direction of the person above them. They don't have their own
mm.
thoughts and opinions, their own strategies. They're not leading anyone in their daily lives. So it's like, why am I designating and calling you a leader? What makes your thoughts and opinions more valuable than my thoughts and opinions? Right? And
Yeah.
that's something that I've gone toe to toe with leaders in my organization about. It's like, because I'm lower than you on the totem pole in an organization, I bring an idea to the table and you get say over my idea because of your title, but not based on the merit of our ideas. Right. And this
Right.
should be a meritocracy where people are able to bring things from the bottom up and say, we need to change these things, especially when they're closer to the things that need to be changed. And for
Mhm.
leaders to, in some way, investigate that and decide whether or not, like, hey, yes, that's a good idea. And if not, it's not just I outrank you and I'm a leader so I'm saying no. It's like, hey, we looked into that and here's the reasons why it might not be a good pursuit. And that like
Right.
re-weaponizes the person bringing the thought forward, right? So anyway, my original point is I'm cautious to use the word leader for leadership in an organization because I don't clearly see that a lot of these people are leaders, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, let's play with words. Let's play with etymology. When
Yeah.
you look at managers, what do? They just manage people. They
Yes.
just make sure their work gets done. They just make sure that
Yes.
it looks good. They just make sure they get 100% on the test. They just make
Yes.
sure that the bottom line is getting filled at their individual contribution level, which is the ROI in the company. Because when you
Yes.
get paid $60,000, you're expected to bring in, give or take double that, I guess, probably.
Yeah.
The ROI is probably twofold for each individual contributor. That would be just my guess off the top of my head, just because you're supposed to bring in a profit. And then you have revenue lines and expenses lines and like those sorts of things. So, with benefits and all those things included, that's also a cost to the company. So, like if you're making 60K, but you have benefits and those sorts of things, they're probably expecting you to bring in like $120,000, just off the top of the head. So that's what managers do. They manage you.
Yep.
Directors, they direct some sort of team vision. So it's like sales directors, they're directing the sales vision, which is like the quota for this region needs to be this.
Yep.
You need to use this system, that system. You need to make this many calls. You need to set this many meetings and have this many deals. They direct some sort of blueprint or some sort of approach to hit your quota. Um, and it's just at a mass scale. Like you're a director, so you got more people. Like you have the managers and the individual contributors.
Yep.
Managers just have individual contributors, which isn't as many. teams
Right.
of, 5, maybe 10 people. Then you get to, you know, the upper level, those like vice president, executive vice president level, like, you start kind of getting up to the C suite or just more of like the top like director roles, a little bit above the director, but below the C suite. So like that vice president, executive vice president roles, those people are just, in my opinion, those people just take the orders from the C suite executives and just kind of like tell the directors, this is what you need to do. This is kind of how you need to do it. And you need to mold it into a fashion that works. And, what they care about is their department, like if marketing has an executive vice president, is their department, you know, maximizing the budget that they get every year?
Yep.
Because if they're in the red, if they're a minus percentage of ROI, that's where they're like, we need to scale back either people or resources, whether it's systems, dinners, stuff like that. Got to scale it back. And
Yep.
then you have the C suite, which they have their own kind of objectives to get done. But they have to report to the founder because in the end, the founder has the vision for the whole corporation, and they want
Yeah.
to do it in this sort of way. Um, but what I've kind of realized through working with like kind of founders and those sorts of things, the founders don't create like all the detailed blueprints. It's the people below the founder, and the founder's just like, this is my vision and this is how we need to get there. So I need you guys to iron out the details. So that's kind of just my thought process. And you're right, it's not necessarily leadership. Like managers just manage people, directors direct people to
Yeah.
some sort of vision for the company. And then the
Yeah.
vice presidents are kind of just like, they talk. They just like to talk in front of the teams, in front of a lot of people, and say. And what's interesting? I think like what I've noticed too is a lot of people just say words to like get some sort of like time gap filled, or you know just to have a bunch of corporate jargon to like make them sound smart, but they don't provide any value to the conversation. Like I've
Right.
noticed that a lot too, and I just don't think that's how leaders work.
I agree. So I would say that leadership is a character trait, right?
Hmm.
Not a job title. It's a character
Right.
trait. It's not a designation within an organization. It's, do you carry the characteristics of a leader? And then you can be designated as a leader and someone worthy of leadership, right? Like unequivocally agree. And so to tie on to your points at like varying levels, and I've been working through these thoughts recently on how to help people in the 9 to 5 working space understand their roles and responsibilities within the organization as they climb the hierarchy, right? So a lot of what you just were mentioning, and these are things that I think would benefit people who are, well, really at every level of corporate employment. But here's how I would say it: if you're an individual contributor, your job in that role is to perfect the execution of your job. It's to get very, very good at executing at what your job is, right? The next level up from once you've mastered that, and each level requires mastery from what I can tell. Once you've mastered that, your next role would be to move into management, right? And at that point, to your point earlier, you're responsible for the coordination and delegation of people, right? Where so you know how to do the thing that needs to be done at the bottom level, and now you're telling people what to do and how to do it, right? So now you have people working underneath you that you're making into masters or perfecters of that skill set, right? Then you move into, let's say, the director level. Now your objective or goal at the director level is to define the strategy for the
Mm,
managers so the managers can tell the individual contributors how to execute on that strategy. So at the director level, you are taking the strategy, you're giving it to the manager so that the manager can inform the individual contributors on how to execute towards that strategy. The manager then reports out the statuses of that strategy to the director. Then we get to the VPs, right? And the VPs are responsible for creating the strategy, creating something from nothing, right? Where there is
Mhm.
no strategy that exists for a specific department. That's where your VPs fall, where they are really responsible for crafting a narrative, for taking the unseen and making it seen, and working in cohorts with C-level executives to do that. And that's for their specific part of the organization. So then they're defining this strategy, they flow it down to their directors, who then communicate it to their managers, who then get their individual contributors to work on it, right? Trickle down economics. And then when you get above a VP and you're in the C suite of things, that's where you're defining the strategy for the company. You're responsible for looking at the organization holistically, and you're saying, hey, where do we want to take this organization in the next 5, 10, 15 years? And that's where like macroeconomics comes into play, an understanding of the market that you're in, the competitive landscape.
Mhm.
You've got to be navigating all those waters. And then you take that big vision strategy and you tell it to your VPs. The VPs create a strategy around how that influences their part of the organization, and that flows downward. Right. So at each level, there's a level of mastery. At the individual contributor level, you're mastering the fine details. You're mastering the execution. The manager level, you're mastering the allocation of human capital and human resources. At the director level, you're mastering the distribution of strategy among the managers on your team. At the VP level, you're mastering the creation of strategy from whatever the C level executives have defined as it pertains to your part of the organization. And that's always a piece I like to put out there to help people so that when they look at where they're at, it's like, okay, if I'm a VP, my objective is to take the company strategy, see how this applies to my part of the organization, and define a strategy on how we can attack that larger vision based on our individual contribution or our specific facet of the organization. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good description, really good points. So thanks for clarifying kind of the detailed information of each role. Yeah, I think that, you know, because being an individual contributor for 4 5 years, I guess the toughest part has been being able to move into a role of managing other people. Because like I've managed people like in college. Like I was in res life. I was a resident director. um did a lot of charity fundraising where I had to manage teams of like 10 people to help me and get to like fundraising goals and those sorts of things. um you know I guess there's sometimes situations where people are really good at their jobs and they don't move up. What is the reasoning behind that, and how can someone kind of get out of a situation like that? Because there are a lot of talented people, I feel like, that are out there right now that are stuck behind like complacent managers, or like managers that aren't really good, but they're just like enough to stay where they are. And like it's hard for people just to jump from like individual contributor to a director type of role. So like how do people get out of situations like that where they know they're good enough to be in a managerial spot or a director spot, but they can't get to that role?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think this kind of brings a lot of my cohesive thoughts together. So you're in that spot. You're at a 9 to 5 organ. You're at a company. You're working 9 to 5, right? Um, Part of the problem with mastering what you do at the individual contributor level is if you're good at it, management is not going to want to move you up because they want people who have perfected and mastered that. So there's two sides to that coin. Yes, you should master that skill set to prove your worth or validity, if you will. The next thing is that if you're really good at it, they're not going to want to move you beyond that because you're really good at it, and you likely make everyone else's job in the hierarchy easier, right? Because you are the guy to go to execute on a task. And there's not a lot of people who execute out there. Like, believe me, people who are high level performers at their job and executing at to the level of rigor they could be, there's not a lot of them out there. So when you find a good one, people tend to want to keep them where they're at. So the way that I've worked around this, and I think the way that anyone could apply this is first you vocalize to your manager your intent to move up, right? You have to make it known. That brings the awareness The only time we can make change is when we're aware, right? And so if you haven't made that vocalization to your leadership, it needs to be done. You need to make them aware that's your intent and that's where you want to go. The second thing is that you start taking on the tasks of your manager without them asking you to do it, right? So if you have people on the team that you're working with, if there's, let's say, 6 individual contributors on a team and you're the top performing one who's perfected your skill set, you start influencing and helping those around you to be where you're at, to get them to the level of performance that you're at. If you can prove that you can cultivate the skill set of other people on your team, that alone is a designation for manager title, right? That's what a manager should be doing, is cultivating the people below them to bring them up, while allocating them as a resource. So if you can do that as an individual contributor, you can prove your worth as a manager, because before you get to the next level, you're going to need to prove that you can do that thing. You're going to need to embody that role before you get there. And so that's something that you have to take up on your own, because the manager's not going to tell you, hey, I want you to now cultivate these people. You need to do that for yourself and advocate for yourself and say, hey, I've cultivated Jim, John, Sally, and Susan to be as high performing as I am. I've allocated them across projects. Here's how they're executing. And your manager's going to be like, this person needs to be in leadership position, right? Now, if you have some of those managers that are out there that are scared to lose their job, and when you're a high performer, they don't want to promote you because you'll make them look like shit, well, that exists, and that's pretty pervasive across a lot of organizations. If you're in that
Mm,
spot, one of three things you can do. One, you can go to their manager, so your director most likely, and talk to them about your intent and show them what you've done to prove yourself worthy of management. Two, you can move to another part of the organization as a manager. You can go to a different manager and say, hey, here's the ways that my skills have been manifesting themselves, and I'm ready to be a manager at this part of the organization. Three, if all else fails, you jump ship to another company. You find a company who will recognize your skill set, and on your resume, you indicate all the things that you executed on your team as an individual contributor, and the way that you allocated resources. Those are the three ways to get past that hurdle, the way that I see it.
do you see jumping around to different departments being detrimental to your career?
No, I see it as a great benefit. I would advise anyone that's been in a role for more than 2 years to get out of that role and get into another part of the organization. The more that you can understand the way that an organization works holistically, the quicker you are on a path to C-level leadership. Right? As a C-level leader, you need to understand the various parts of the organization. That means operations, that means sales, that means finance, right? That means accounting, that means marketing. So if you have the opportunity to bounce between all those roles in your organization, and the entire time you're doing that, you're creating a cohesive vision and picture of the company, that's only going to benefit you if your goal is to become a C-level leader, right? That's only going to get you there quicker because you can see a company holistically. Where people begin to fail is they view a company myopically, right? You're in operations, and so you think the most important thing to scale an organization is operational efficiency. Well, then you get into sales and you understand, like, oh, sales drives 85% of the organization's growth, right? So it's like, okay, then you get into marketing and understand, well, we can't get customers to our salespeople if we don't market the organization well. So building that holistic picture and framework will only benefit you. And I think you stay in a role for 2 years, and as long as you're constantly moving up, even if you're jumping departments, you get a greater holistic picture of the organization, and that'll only benefit your growth long term.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Love it. Love it. You've been an incredible guest. I think you've really encompassed a lot of things with the corporate world and how to navigate the corporate world and also be conscious at the same time. So thanks for coming on. Like, it was really just an amazing opportunity to get this perspective, because I've been really kind of preaching to entrepreneurs a lot, but I really want to help people in the corporate world as well, because I think there is a good balance. And, I think there's an opportunity to do what you love, make money, be happy, live comfortably, live abundantly, all at the same time. Like, I think it's very possible in the world we have today. Not everything has to be so negative. Like, I think there's a lot of positive companies out there that are doing good things. So, uh, amazing stuff. Do you have anything else that you would like to, I guess, finish up on, reflect on, add on to, all the gems that you've dropped?
Yeah, I would like to say a few things. The first thing that I'd like to say is there are more than there's more than one way to achieve freedom. You can achieve freedom through entrepreneurship. You can achieve freedom through being an investor. You can achieve freedom through being an employee. What's most important is understanding the skill set on how to do that, right? It's about an effective allocation of resources. The second thing that I want to say is don't get so enamored by everything that you see on social media. Open your phone and look at all of the people on there that are coaches and starting a business. Tell me that's not a rat race in itself. Those people are just striving for pieces of your income so that they can be free, right? That's a rat race. That in itself. So social media hasn't in some ways become its own rat race. And it's so duplicative. Everyone's doing the same thing on social media, right? You have your marketing leads, you have your paid ads. Like people are just copying and pasting styles across social media to get their own version of freedom. There's so many ways to attain freedom. And what's more important is the skill set on how to become free, not the modality. So don't get so caught up in being a business owner to accomplish freedom. It's going to take you 10 years as a business owner to become free anyway. You've got to build that. You could put the same 10 years in at an organization that gives you equity or pays you well, and you live below your means and you invest appropriately, and you can achieve the same level of freedom. It's about the skill set, not the modality, right? And the final thing that I would say, the most important takeaway from all of this is never sacrifice your personal integrity for personal gain. Do not sacrifice your personal integrity based on someone else's feelings of what they want you to do, think, or feel. And do not sacrifice your personal integrity for money ever.
Right on. Yeah. Excellent stuff, Cody. Yeah, that was a lot of truth for sure. So lots to reflect on. I think this was a great episode for people that, are trying to just figure out life and, figure out where they truly belong, and, where they want to uh, kind of achieve their goals and aspirations, which can be at a corporation, but also has to be internalized first, has to be
Of
internally
course.
sound first. So, thank you for opening up about your personal life too. Thanks for sharing all of your wisdom. And yeah, would love to, definitely we'll have to get you on here again, just to get even more perspective on your subconscious and how to program those things too, man.
I
Love your
appreciate you, brother.
stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Cody.